don't have much time. We don't have much time today, but today we want to consider several things, and I'm gonna share my screen so that you can see the lecture that we're going to be contending for today, and then we're going to watch the film, which is what we will do after this. But all right, here we go. Well, welcome to Caribbean Thought, guys. Oops. Let me go to. We want to pick up from where we left off from the last class. The last class, welcome to Caribbean Thought, and we'll go right in. We'll begin right now. Welcome to Caribbean Thought. I want you to follow with me. By the way, if you guys went on to JTS Moodle, that would be great, because JTS Moodle has the timeline, and I don't know if Anil and Chantel shared with you guys timeline, because we're going to go through the timeline quickly. I'm going to ask you to time me, guys. When it is right now, what time is it now in Jamaica? It's about to be 6:30, right? So we finish class at 9:30. The film we're going to watch takes about an hour and a half. So we need an hour and a half. So when it's 7 o'clock your time, when it's 7:30 your time, let me know. I'm going to take a break at some point during this lecture, and then I want us to spend some time to review the timeline for the Caribbean, and then we'll watch the film. The book that we started with today, it's very important that you guys get to understand the concept behind neoliberalism, globalization, income inequality, poverty, and resistance. And it's a powerful start. It's a very, very powerful book, but we'll talk about it at some point. We'll delve into it, not this class, a little bit, not next week's class, but the week after that, we will delve into it, because next week we have a guest coming, and then and I won't be here, and then the following week I will return, and we will talk some more about neoliberalism, globalization, income inequality, poverty, and resistance, and segue into the idea of corruption. We'll talk about corruption within the Caribbean and so on and so forth. But last week's class, we began with a brain teaser, and I asked the question, what is the Caribbean? Who are you? What's your place in the Caribbean or in the world as a person from the Caribbean or Caribbean of African descent? Or do you see yourself as transcending African history to just what is today or what you can remember from your parents and what our books say today? Can you trace your history? So we started that last week. The second part of that brain teaser, I asked you guys, what separates Haiti and Cuba from Jamaica, Trinidad, Guyana, St. Lucia, and Barbados? In terms of their geopolitics and their place in the world today as nations. By the way, anybody can answer that question? What, in terms of geopolitics and their place in the world today as nations? And what it is that separates Haiti and Cuba from Trinidad? Anybody can answer that? From Trinidad, Guyana, St. Lucia, and Barbados. Anybody can answer that? Anybody want to take a crack at that? Anyone?
84 for the independent, and other countries negotiated it.
Powerful. Who was that? Who said that? Who was that just now?
Garrett.
Who?
Garrett.
Garrett. I mean, what you okay? How did you arrive at that? And say that for the students again. Say that again. You said what separates You said Haiti did what?
Both fight the French for their independence, while other Caribbean nations negotiate it through political means.
Definitely, definitely. Yes, you are absolutely correct. And that's what separates Haiti from Trinidad, Jamaica, Guyana, St. Lucia, and Barbados. The independence that they got was ceremonially gifted. The independence that they got was ceremonially gifted. Okay, and that's what separates those countries. Haiti fought the French, and of course Cuba was also, they fought the Spanish and the Americas and the post-industrial countries. So that's powerful, very very good. Um, Anybody else want to quickly say anything as it relates to that? Anybody else want to take a crack at that? I mean, wants to make a comment as it relates to that? Anybody wants to comment on that?
Sir, in regards to what Garrett said, I would say, well, when I was going to school, I used to hear people say the reason the 80s in the state that they're in, they got independence too early. The funny part with that is because they fought for it. I think to date is the only successful slave revolt in human history, they say, defeating the French. Basically, the first, what I would say is a first Black Republic. I
Yeah.
know you correct me on that. Yeah, so it's just the way it was done versus, as I say, gifted versus fought for it. For on the Cuban side, the Cuban Revolution, basically, um, they overthrew like a US-backed dictatorship. Um, so as a result, I think they are maybe still the only communist state in the Western Hemisphere. So I think what happened is because they overthrew that US-backed dictatorship. I think that's why they're still in the bad books for the US because of how they of what was done basically because of what was done. So
Yeah, that's
um,
true. And they are among the poorest countries in the world, Haiti and Cuba. They
yeah,
are,
because they sabotage somewhat the embargoes and all of these different things. So
right,
because they
because that is true.
so they're
Um,
being punished for it. They're being punished for their fight for freedom.
That is true, and that's very important to note. Countries like Jamaica, Trinidad, they have navigated the complexities of the post-colonial governance, and they attained some degree of political autonomy. Just so you know, Haiti and Cuba have a history of fighting for their independence, but their efforts to chart their own destinies remain ensnared. So, in a sense, you still want to question: are they truly free? You know, because they have done everything to the post-industrial countries. They have done everything to undermine their development and their growth, and that's very important. And of course, while some countries have flourished in the wake of independence, others continue to grapple. But I mean, of course, you want to ask the questions: are these other countries flourishing? They have marginal growth, marginal gain. Any major gain is an affront to those who are supposed to be ahead. It's an affront to the US. It's an affront to Spain. Okay. Um, but that's something to consider. The next thing is, how can Caribbean determine its own life and society despite its, yes, Christopher Morris, go ahead.
Yes, sir. I want to ask a question based on the whole independence issue.
Yeah.
Considering the road to Persia and international policy, which country is really independent?
Which country is really independent? You mean
Yes.
Caribbean country?
Right. Of let us say, for argument's sake, America.
I mean, sorry, yeah, go ahead. You said America is independent?
No, I'm saying in respect to I'm saying let us use America,
Yeah.
right? As world, let us argue from the point of world power. As it relates to the road to Persia, when we talk about international policies or international relations, which Caribbean country is really independent? Which Caribbean country is really free? And we can safely say is independent of any um oh,
Okay, I
you know,
understand. Yeah, I understand what you're
right.
saying. I mean, but of course, um, I mean, it's difficult to say which country is really independent. They are I mean, we are all independent. I mean, the countries that received independence, we're independent until or unless we decide to do something that challenge
Mm-hmm.
the competitive position of
Mm-hmm.
the post-industrial. So we
Yes.
are. You understand what I'm saying? We are independent
Yes, sir. Yes.
in so far as we
It's, it's
we
conditional.
yes, it is. There we go. That's the word. It is conditional
Mhm.
independence.
Yeah, we
Because
are allowed to make
any
certain
gain,
decisions.
and when you're going to see
Yes.
that when we go through the timeline and based on the film you're about to watch today and so on, you will understand what I'm really getting at, guys. Okay, what I'm really getting at, and the book that I'm writing a new book. It's entitled Neoliberal Globalization Reconsidered. Neo-capitalism and the death of nations. It will be out soon. It should have been out from last year, but I've been doing several edits. But it will be out soon. And the idea of that book is powerful. I'm not going to say too, I'm going to share some of that, but it's part of my research. But it is conditional. You see what's going on in Iran? You see what's
Because,
going
sir,
on with you?
remember,
You see what's going on with Ukraine?
yes,
Okay.
because remember, independence, and a lot of people get this wrong. We are allowed to make certain decisions as long as we do not transgress certain laws, certain
Yes.
regulations, right?
Yes.
But
That is correct.
the moment we try to do that, then comes the iron thing around our neck.
Yes. Precisely. Precisely.
Okay.
You see what's going on in Cuba today?
Okay. Okay,
You
sir.
see what's going on in Venezuela? Venezuela is an oil-rich country. Okay, it's an oil-rich country, and they have an embargo on them for many years. Okay, and so that's important to note. That's important, and we're going to get into that later on. But how can Caribbean determine its own life and society despite its colonial past and its vulnerabilities? And when we talk about vulnerability, we're talking about the size, natural disasters, dependence on foreign aid and investment. And here goes another one that I added today: lack of military to defend its borders. How can the Caribbean determine our own life and society, determine and then how can, let's just say Caribbean wants to become enough to develop our competitive edge. Yes, we want to grow and to develop. In the 1950s, 1957, Jamaica was in 1957 to the 1960s. Jamaica found bauxite in the 1950s, and by 1962, 63, 64, we were growing. We were rivaling some of the post-industrial countries' growth. We were one of the fastest growing countries in terms of economically. Our level, that of Singapore, our GDP, our gross domestic product was growing at 5.7, 5.2%. The country was growing. Okay. But then but of course, that was a problem. I mean, we also shot ourselves in the foot by not saving our money, and in terms of not how we were spending it. And we have had investment, we've had growth, but we have not managed it well. But at the same time, globalization, the speed towards globalization and the oil crisis that affected us has also helped to open up our economies and change our fate. We have to learn from the past. In fact, I said in the book, to embark on a new beginning necessitates a voyage into the past, a journey that reveals the foundations of our narrative. But of course, part of our Caribbean vulnerability is our size. If size is our vulnerability, then of course we need a united Caribbean then. Talk about natural disasters. Of course, that is always an issue. So we have to do things to science. We have to engage in science and technology and how we develop as a country, the infrastructure with it. We need to develop our infrastructure within the Caribbean to mitigate and to minimize against natural disasters. Okay. In terms of our dependence on foreign aid and investment, now we have to then decrease our dependence on foreign aid and investment. Okay. That is a major issue. Right now, the Caribbean, we in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, we were dependent on investments and aid from the US. We still are, okay, and Spain and the post-industrial. Now, if we are still dependent on them, how can we chart our own course? How can we make any decisions? And by the way, Ramesh Ramcharan says that the structural adjustment, which is the policy that was used to create globalization, to open up our economies, to make us more penetratable, in effect involves one thing. It is to create the transfer of decision making from local hands. Okay, that's what Ramesh Ramsawan in the book, The Challenge of Structural Adjustment in the Commonwealth Caribbean, he talks about that, the transfer of local decision. If you borrow money from people, okay, and they tie to conditions, then of course they are going to have the greatest say in how you. And now we live in a competitive world as well. But the African was never competitive in a sense. We were very communal. We were all about community. That is why Europe was able to go in and to underdevelop and steal and do what they did, because the African was always about sharing, was always about togetherness, inclusivity. The white man or the Europe was never about that. They are competitive. That is why they were able to dominate the African. Okay, and even within. And that's where I was going to say something, but I don't want you guys to stone me. Even in terms of the faith that we have, it's also based on competitive. There's a competitive nature. But anyways, nevertheless, that's the point I'm trying to make here. We live in a competitive world, and the thing is, we cannot be competitive. The moment you become too competitive and too big and advantageous, it's problematic. Okay. And I said to you, so size, natural disasters, and dependence on foreign aid and investment. Now we're looking to China and the lack of a military to defend its borders. Let me ask you a question. If Iran had nuclear weapons or the ability to defend its borders, you think that Israel and the US would have attacked in the way they did? What you guys think? And I wrote. Sorry, go ahead.
Sir, yeah, it's a very important question, but here's the issue with that question. Again, there is always a head and a tail.
Yeah.
And so it comes back to globalization, which I am listening to you, and you are touching some points that are of paramount importance. And I honestly don't think all of us will understand based on the content that you have to deliver on the time. But you're touching some very points, because one of the things that I was looking at again was delegation, which you touched at in brief. And so in the case like Iran, we would have to seriously consider in the present world that we live in, how many, if it is possible, how many kings would we have? How many rulers? Which nation would? How many nations would be ruling? Because there can only be one sovereign nation. So it means then that based on in the context of globalization and international policy and some things that you have mentioned, it means that America would not be in a position to challenge Iran if they had that capability.
Precisely. China, 20 years ago or 30 years ago, China never had a nuclear weapon. And okay, they had an army, but they were developing their nuclear weapons, and over the last couple, all right? And China was a developing country about 25, 30 years ago. Now they have developed. Not only that, they have nuclear weapons. No country will dare, if China decides that they were going to attack Taiwan, or no country will dare. Of course, not the US or is not going to go up against China because of their defensive capability. And for China developed their defensive capability so that they can chart their own course and live their lives peacefully. Of course, they're not going. I mean, China. If you look at China, is not attacking anyone. China is not attacking nobody. But it's those who promote democracy that is attacking. Okay. But China now has the capability and the latitude, okay, to develop its own policies and to carry out its own plans. Yes, because one, it has a military, but not only does it have a military, it also have nuclear weapons. Okay, Iran wanted to develop its sovereignty, its autonomy. And so it realized in order to develop its sovereignty and its autonomy, it had to develop its military, and it also had to develop its nuclear weapons. Now, by the way, nuclear weapon is not just it's also help with modernizing a country. Okay, enriching nuclear is also a part of modernizing the country, bringing it into the 21st century. It provides you with technology, advanced capability. That's a problem. Iran becoming a dominant country in terms of economically, technologically, scientifically, and militaristically threaten the world order, threaten the dominance of the West in the region, in the Middle East. Israel's presence in the Middle East, okay, represents, okay, the extent of Western domination. Iran's military capabilities and their hope threatens that. So of course, yes, they quickly attack and then call these people terrorists because they weren't supposed to be developed. Cuba, Haiti, Venezuela, and the Caribbean, if these countries become too great, too powerful, it threatens the extent and the power of Western domination in the region. And so therefore, you see, Venezuela is constantly in tension. And that is okay. Cuba is constantly in tension, and that is okay. I mean, the Caribbean as a whole, their wealth and their development is managed in a sense, and that is okay. Poverty, a level of poverty is fine. A level of instability is okay, because the moment they become united and economically stable, it then threatens the world order and the dominance of those of the status quo, of those who have all of the elitists in the world. Okay, and that is important to note. Let's continue with the lecture, because we can't stay too long on this. So we want to finish the lecture we started last week. All right, and I said to you that I want to really spend some time to share some things from my book, my new book that I'm working on, that I want to just, no one has it. It's okay, you guys are among the first. Only the publishers have it, actually, just only the publishers. But I want to make some point that I'm raising from that book. Here we go. The preface says, to begin anew, we must return. And in it, I said, the wealth of nations, and I hope you are listening, the wealth of nations was putatively derived from hard work and savings that characterized post-industrial economies. It justified the accumulation of capital by the dominant class. Somebody asked me last week, what do you mean by the elites? Who are the elites? The elites are the dominant class. Capitalist societies tend to be ruled economically, socially, and politically by those who own and control productive property, the circulation of commodities, and the flow of money. It is this leading sector of oligarchs, finance capital, that now holds and predominantly control in the economy and in the political sphere. The dominant class as a whole rule as a plutocracy, okay? The dominant, and we're talking, the dominant class is, and they form a nucleus throughout the world, within that world order. So again, the wealth of nations, if you read Adam Smith, if you guys ever read Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations, he said that the wealth of nations, the reason why you have wealthy nations and poor nations is because the wealthy nations worked hard. It was based on hard work and savings. That is why post-industrial economies develop and grow like they did. That is not true. It was through theft. That is the point I'm getting at. Through theft, nepotism, connectionism. Yes, went to Africa and stole their resources and their people and so on and so forth. Anyways, it justified. So the justification for post-industrial economies deriving wealth, it justified this, the accumulation of capital by the dominant class in such societies was based on hard work and savings. I'm challenging that view. Max Weber further theorized that this economic process was rooted in the Protestant ethic. The Protestant ethic was work as a pathway to salvation. The Protestant ethic. They said the Protestant ethic defined the ethic within capitalist post-industrial societies. That ethic led them to realize wealth, profit. However, this is far from the gospel. It is not true, because the wealth that the dominant capitalist class in the post-industrial countries have, it came from the wealth from working hard has been denied to certain people and places in the global south and the global north. Certain people in the global south. And when I talk about the global south, I'm talking about what we know, what people used to call third world countries. And if you listen to Donald Trump, day before yesterday, a couple of days ago, he said he was talking to somebody the other day saying the election was rigged, just like what happened in third world countries. He's talking about Caribbean countries, black and brown countries. Okay, that's third world countries. We don't use formerly developing countries, but we don't use those terms anymore. We say global south, because we're not going to use those words to define us, to define us and to condition us, because conditioning is important. We won't allow that to condition us. Okay, we use the word global south and global north. Black and brown peoples in the world are the poorest and have been used to properties of the global north through slave labor. chattel slavery, and later wage slavery. Remember, I noticed I said through slave labor and later through wage slavery, as production became scientific, which cheapened their work and paid them pittance. Yes, moving from slave labor to wage has not guaranteed, is not a success. In fact, it was a great idea. It was a marvelous idea, because now the masters don't have to treat you like horses and put you to find you place to sleep, feed you. Now you have to feed yourself, find place to live. All they are responsible is pay you pittance, and you use that to do all of that. Now they're actually saving. Okay. This was the basis of the freedoms granted to slaves, black and brown people, who were then incorporated into the working class, as they were never part of any class in modern society, not until the change in their working designation as chattel laborers. Previously, they were property and tools of labor. However, it became evident that this kind of labor needed to be more profitable, given the rapid technological advances changing how work was organized. So now, as we change how work is organized and work become more scientific, they realize, oh, we will still have more control over labor. We don't need a whip anymore. Yes? They were first property, then labor, never owners. Okay? Lisa.
Yes, sir. Good evening. First, I must apologize for joining class late. But question, sir, do you intend to share your PowerPoint? Because I'm just seeing the introduction on the screen.
I'm sharing the PowerPoint. Yes. Okay. This is that's part of the PowerPoint, but I'm sharing from Neocapitalism, Neoliberal Globalization Reconsidered, Neocapitalism and the Death of Nations, and then we will.
No. I'm talking about on screen, sir.
Oh, you wanted me to share what I'm the other section of it? No,
yeah, while you.
That's fine. I mean, you will get into that. I don't want to share that on screen yet. Okay, for a particular reason. It's my published. It's for privacy. For privacy, I don't want to share that yet, because this will be published. Okay. And
this is your book you're referring to, right?
Book that I've written, that is before the publishers, that will be published by the end of this month. It's actually was supposed to be the textbook for this class, but it was delayed a bit. But I'm making a very important point. According to Oppenheimer in his book, The State, and Martin Oppenheimer is my advisor who has worked with me on this project. He wrote the book about SNCC, the State of Modern Society, and several other books. He's Professor Emeritus at Rutgers University. He was at University of Pennsylvania. He said, he wrote the book, The State of Modern Society. He said that the triumph of the North in the US Civil War marked the hegemony of industrial capital over all other factions of capital. Okay? Very important. The point I'm making here is that black and brown people who form part of people with low incomes and working class, whether in advanced societies or in global south societies, their hard work within the socioeconomic history of labor and monopoly capital has not guaranteed any significant wealth or gains. And notice the word significant. Instead, their hard work has left them comparatively poorer, vulnerable, uncompetitive, and dependent, leading to their death. This death is not physical, but it's a position of lack and constant tension between the forces of society that have systematically stolen their wealth through de jure and de facto factors that degrade their labor and any gains from their work. It is the black position in the world. I'm going to stop right there. Go ahead, Christopher, and then move on to the next slide. But go ahead.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to ask you a question.
Yes.
Based on the things that you write on and stuff, have you ever considered writing about the King of the North and King of the South in the context of globalization?
Well, I mean, the King of the North and the King of the South?
Yes.
I mean, what do you mean?
in terms of what you spoke of earlier, what was the term you used? Something about the gospel. And you said it is not. You spoke about the
I
gospel.
said it's far from gospel. I mean, it said the wealth of nations, according to Adam Smith, who is the father of economics of capitalist society. He provided a justification for the wealth of post-industrial economies, and he said it's from because they have a Protestant ethic of hard work.
Right. That the Protestant ethic.
But that is not true. That is just a convenient excuse for what they have done. They have enslaved people. Okay, have stolen from their labor. Stolen. In fact, you're gonna see something when you go through the timeline. From 1655 to 1833, there was slavery. But in 1833, slavery was abolished in the British Caribbean. Okay? But yet still, the enslaved people in the Caribbean didn't know that they were free. And they were still working on the plantation, although slavery was abolished until when was that? 1865 or 1866?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So all that time they were free.
Yeah.
And but in 1866, you know what happened when they realized that when they heard the Emancipation Proclamation, the proclamation finally got there, and they realized, wait, we're free? Why are we still here? They all left the plantation. But guess what? The plantations owners and masters were paid money because they abolished slavery, but the black people were never paid any money. Okay, they were never given anything. After they worked for years being free. And okay, that's quite interesting. Yes, that's quite interesting. But I mean, but that's something to, and I wrote an article about that as well. That's part of the new book as well. But I mean, let's go to the next slide because we don't have much time. Remember, when 2 hours is left, when an hour and 45 minutes is left for the class, let me know. Let me run through this. Some of the key questions that we want to consider: what is the Caribbean? Make sure you can answer these questions. Who determines Caribbean identity? Who determines Caribbean identity? Something doesn't seem right with that.
Slave masters.
Good question. Okay. All right. Yeah. And why do many Caribbean nations remain economically dependent after political independence? What role did colonialism, slavery, debt, and globalization play in shaping the Caribbean? Is Caribbean independence truly complete? How do Caribbean think challenge US-centric history and knowledge systems? And what will the Caribbean be today and tomorrow? What will the Caribbean be today and tomorrow? Good question, and we will answer those questions.
Sir, I was just taking a picture of the question. Can you go back to it, please, sir? Thank you.
Sorry. You take a pic of those questions, very important questions.
Thank you.
All right, let me move to the next slide. Some of the major themes that we have to consider is Caribbean thought as political inquiry, rejecting Columbus as the beginning, the Caribbean as paradise, and crisis. Some of the major themes that we will explore: colonialism and dependency, Fanon, Foucault, and post-colonial critique, Haiti and the unfinished revolution, Caribbean independence and incomplete sovereignty, China, the United States, and modern Caribbean geopolitics. Important thinkers, the documentary Life and Death. We'll show that. We won't be, I don't know if I can go through all of that today. There is something missing from this. Let me stop sharing my screen for a second, because something is missing from that PowerPoint. I don't know if that has to be the it was the wrong, it was that the wrong, yeah, it was. I think that was something is missing from my oh, okay, there. Oh, it's actually there. All right, there's a point. I wanted to make a point, which I thought it wasn't showing up on the slide, but this is a very important. Let me go back to the slide. Share. Let me go back. So go to from current slide. There we go. I said in the introduction, we will start with life. We will start with life is about people and how people relate. I said that last week. We will start with life is about people and how people relate. Again, life is about people and how people relate. Yet, life is what we make it or allow others to make of it for us. The Caribbean's position in the dynamic of life today is supposed to be one of dependency, backward, uncompetitive, and third place or third world, wage-dependent nations. That's what we're supposed to be. Even after independence, we were supposed to, again, we say life is about people and how people relate. So, you know, and we talked earlier, I talk about the position of the black man, the position of the brown man, the black and brown position in the world. Okay. And it's the same, and by the way, it's the same position, whether you live in Philadelphia in a predominantly black neighborhood. With Martin Oppenheimer talk about black colonies within the post-industrial resemble that of the predominant of the former colonial colonies in the global south. The global south, where you have, wherever you find black and brown people, there's lack, there's dependency. Okay, the position of the black man, the position of the brown man. Okay, if you in the global north, it's the same thing. In the global north, the black and brown man cannot celebrate because he's living in the post-industrial. He might have access to opportunity. But in the book, the preface of the book, I said, what voice do I have? I'm still black. Fanon talks about that. What voice do I have? You are still black, you are still brown. Or you still speak with it doesn't matter where you go. A black and brown man, you're still supposed to stay within your lane. You're still supposed to be in a position of lack. I was working in a predominantly white industry in the US. I won't call the name of the company. I was a junior executive making good money, driving a very good car. My brother and I, my twin brother and I, he was the vice president and I was the chief of planning. And people had a problem with that. They said, these two, we were the only black person. You could tell the spite that the approach of spite and the resentment, how you drive that car, why you come to work looking like that. And, you know, you're supposed to work hard, but you're not supposed to make money. You're not supposed to be wealthy. You're not supposed to be richer than the others. The moment that happens, it's a problem. You look at Black Wall Street, that happened in the late 1800s or the early 1900s in America. There's a place called Black Wall Street that was growing and developing. It was like the Wall Street that was growing. They had money. They burned it down. It caused a fire. Nobody was held responsible. Yes, because their wealth, they were becoming too powerful. Life is about people and how people relate. Yet life is what we make it. There are some people, and I talk about the black position in the world, the brown position in the world, the Caribbean position in the dynamic of life. The totality of life is supposed to be one of dependency, backward, uncompetitive, and third place or third world, wage dependent nations. We're only supposed to serve the interests of the post-industrial, who are white. Whenever there is progress, it is quickly wiped away. Let me say that again. Whenever there is progress, yeah, you're having progress now. Yes, you're dealing with crime and violence now. Okay? Where did guns come from in the Caribbean? Where did guns come from in Haiti? Huh? Where did guns come from? They come from the post-industrial. They come from the US. Okay? That's where they're coming from. All right? Where are the guns coming from? And it is okay because it helped, because these guns help to create instability. This gun for drug trade. Whenever there is progress, it is quickly wiped away. You see, in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, there was progress. It is quickly wiped away through debt. Okay? In Haiti, they got independence, but by 1825, France leveled, nobody recognized their independence, and they leveled a huge debt so that they have to pay so that they can come into the world, progress, into the world, to be part of the world system. How do we mitigate against that? We must learn the strategy. We must learn the strategy that creates our position in the world, and then strategically rise above it. Strategically rise above it. Let me say that again. Whenever there is progress, it is quickly wiped away.
Cash plus.
Okay. Now, how do we mitigate against that? We must learn the strategy that creates our position in the world, or that allows us to maintain a certain position in the world. And then strategically rise above it. Yes, it's not easy, but we have to do it. Our government have to be strategic and have to be deliberate and intentional. You know, the JLP versus PNP and all these. In Trinidad, you have the PLO versus, because, you know, the same thing in Trinidad, you have the Indian party versus the African parties, and all these. The way the independence that we have is an independence of competition that keeps us separate and apart and divided. We don't have to have a democracy of JLP versus PNP, because that keeps us divided. Because of where we are, because we are a young country, our independence is new. We're just growing, we're just developing, and we in the part of the world, it means that we have to be united. JLP and PNP have to learn to come together. They have to, JLP and PNP, and we're talking about Jamaica. That is why I'm talking a lot about Jamaica. So therefore, that's why I asked you guys to do other countries. But other countries, there is this divide, this political divide. That is what is helping to thwart our development. How can we develop competitively? Yes? How can we come into the modern age if we are constantly fighting against each other politically? That's what has helped to demean Caribbean independence and growth and development in the 1980s. Okay? Because we have inherited a political tradition that keeps us divided within the local, okay? In addition to all the other things that we have to come up against. Okay? So then we go to the key. Now, we say that Caribbean thought as philosophical inquiry. We say the Caribbean thought explores the currents that have shaped the Caribbean. But Caribbean thought does not merely explore these currents descriptively. It involves a philosophical inquiry into them and into the Caribbean itself, especially what we have discovered about the Caribbean since its inception. But we must also develop solutions, not just the professor, because I'm not going to indoctrinate you. I'm going to expose you to various ideas, okay? That I am also, I'm telling you, I told you, some of you who was in the class, when I was in an Africology class and I was like, I don't know, I felt like I was a white boy in this class. Because I've been exposed, we are exposed to European and English education. We know nothing about Africa. Okay? Okay. I remember I was on the tennis court playing tennis, and this guy, after I finished playing tennis with this other person, this guy came up to me and said, "By the way, you're from Jamaica?" Okay, talking about Egypt. And I said, "Oh, you know, I did Egyptology." I'm like, "Oh, the Egyptology is a farce. Egyptology is a lie created by a kind of a school of thought that has stolen the wealth of Africa, changed the name to Egypt and created Egyptology. The name of Egypt was an African name, Kemet. Kemet was a pharaoh, a king, a black king, who created mathematics and civilization."
Was he the king of science or something like that?
Yes. I was like, what? Here am I. Of course, I went to University of Penn, an Ivy League college. You think you know everything. You went to JTS and UE, and you went to the college and you think you know. And this guy who went to no college come and talk to me about all this stuff about Kemet. And I'm like, what the hell? I was like, wow. In fact, I went to Georgetown and University to do my PhD, my Doctor of Liberal Studies. And then I realized that they were providing a kind of education that did not recognize and include African heritage and history. So I went to Temple as well. So I was doing my PhD at Georgetown, but I was also doing a PhD at Temple at the same time. Okay? Doing Africology and now exposing myself to African history and African heritage, which it's very important to get that foundation. It's very good to become a wide person because I'm trying to recenter myself. Okay? But we must, so that is important. We have to be, and it's okay. We must develop solutions, beginning with the strategy that reorient the Caribbean to its center, and that discover and develop deliberately and intentional ways of competing in a competitive world while learning from the mistakes of the past. Yes, Kenyatta.
No, sorry, Evelyn, what you shared a while ago is very interesting because I work with one Iranian and a Pakistani. And
Yeah.
my Pakistani colleague, initially when we met, she would ask a lot of questions about the Caribbean.
Yes.
Specifically, like, so what is Jamaica? And I remember I was asking her, like, what do you mean, what is Jamaica? Because what they taught them was that the Caribbean exists, but from their visualization of the Caribbean, bear in mind we have the internet, they thought that it was just a large pool of water, that there was no islands there. But when she started learning about the Caribbean, and I was telling her more about Jamaica, I remember she asked, like, how can you navigate yourself around the city like this? How do you dress like that? Because your people are like indigenous. I'm like, no, like I was taken aback by the question and the comment.
Oh, wow. I am so happy you said that. Yes, go ahead.
The more she learned about the Caribbean, was the more intrigued she became to the fact that her first trip to the Caribbean was actually to Barbados.
Yes.
And then Jamaica, and as she's learning, and I remember my other colleague who's from Iran, she said, I learned about you folks, but what we were taught was that if you're Black, we're not supposed to interact with you all because you all are evil. You know, so those are the things. So it was surprising to learn that these are things that were taught to them in school, and so forth. So just hearing you speak about that now and like reflecting back on some of those conversations, pretty interesting as to some of how the education system across the globe and what our persons are taught are totally different. For example, like the Black Americans now are learning so much to the point where we're like, oh, we learned this in school. Why didn't you learn it in school? So, yeah.
And, we are divorced from our history for strategically. I said that Fanon talks about the strategy behind colonization. Okay. And part of that involves changing our history and our foundation. Okay. Corrupting it. It's important to know truly your history because, when you steal, I talk about the wealth of nations in the new book. The wealth of nations, okay, was putatively derived from the hard work of people, but that's not true. It's theft. Lands were stolen. In fact, the Caribbean, when you talk about Caribbean identity is not just African. We are also part of the indigenous people that lived on the land. Okay? Yes, Africans came and Africans were coming way before Columbus. And many Africans intermingled with the indigenous population, sharing things. We're going to talk about that. I don't know if I have time. Sharing stuff, sharing artifacts and gold. That's why they thought there was gold in the Caribbean, because when the Columbus came, they thought that they saw guanine, which is gold, and then but they realized that the guanine came from Sierra Leone and Guinea, from Africa. Okay, and there were Africans who were shipwrecked and developed and formed a life in the Caribbean. In fact, the indigenous population of the Americas, including the Caribbean, the indigenous population, so there were Africans living here and they became part of the land and part of the society here in the Caribbean. Okay, so many and people, and they were coming and trading. So they were living. So we were already. So the indigenous population of the Caribbean were Black people who were shipwrecked and who formulated a life here. And some of them came and saw people here, and they created a life. They were living here. So, however, what we're being told is that no, the people that live in the Caribbean, we don't, especially in the English-speaking Caribbean, like Jamaica, Barbados, they're in Trinidad and so on. There's no indigenous population. Many of them come from Africa, were slaves brought here from Africa. That is not necessarily true. Okay, there were Africans here before Columbus came, and there were indigenous people who were already here, who were never brought here as slaves, who were already here. Okay. Who already dominated the land and had a life here. But we are told that that's not what happened. It is important for us to know, it's important for them to say that, there was no, the people who are living on this land, the only connection that they have to the land is the connection through slavery. The connection through Europe, where Europe brought them here. So that you cannot make claim to the land. This is a very important point I'm making here. You got to listen to what I'm saying here. The land, many of the African people, many of us who live, many people from the Caribbean, they are part of the original. Okay, maybe so, yeah, they did bring slaves here, but there were already people here who were already owners of the land, who lived on the land, who can make claim to the land. Haiti. France charged Haiti an indemnity because they said that they stole the land from France. Excuse me, many of the people who live in Haiti were already owners of the land before the Haitians, before France came. There was an indigenous population. There were Africans who were part of the population who owned the land. So here, France is charging them when many people who already lived there owned the land. It was already their land. hate France stole the land from the people who was there. They made it seem as though, no, they discovered it. Nobody, it's important for them to say they discover it so that so nobody can make claim to the land. You understand what I'm, this is a very important point I'm making. I hope you are following me here. Okay. Israel went back to Iraq, to the Middle East. Yes. Because it was their land and they made claim to the land. Because, okay, yeah, they have a history. They have erased Caribbean history or reordered the history and changed up African history so that you cannot make any claim to the land. The land, Jamaica got independence, but we are still paying Britain, and the Caribbean countries pay Britain, and Barbados and Trinidad paying Britain for the land. The land that King's House is on, that is their land. This is a very important point. Go ahead, Lisa.
Sir, as a scholar, you mentioned that they discover.
Yes.
I personally, based on the little knowledge that I have historically, I personally don't believe that we were being discovered. We were
Well, yeah. We've made that point already in this class from the beginning. We said that we don't believe in discovery. We don't believe that Christopher Columbus did. But I'm making the point that, so we're making the point that discoveries, they have to say that to prevent any claim against their discovery. You understand what I'm saying, quote unquote? Yes?
Oh, all right.
Yes. It's a strategy. Okay. So that that is very important. We said that that we don't start with Columbus. We said that we start. However, for the Europeans, they are going to say that they discovered it. Okay, they have to say that. They have to say that so that the indigenous people and the people who are in the Caribbean cannot make any claim, yes, to the land, because in their estimation, the people who are here already died out and they brought us here. Not necessarily true. And next week, when the Urban Indian Heritage Society come, they're going to talk a little bit about that. That is why it's important to note. So important to note that this is powerful. Caribbean thought is not simply the study of Caribbean history or culture. It is a philosophical inquiry into the forces and currents that shape Caribbean life. It asks the students to think critically about colonialism. Now, this is important these definitions are quite important. Take a picture of it. This colonialism is the stripping away of a person's humanity, the depersonalization and domination of people through conquest, exploitation, racial hierarchy, cultural erasure, erasing your culture, political control. Colonialism seeks not only to occupy land, but to occupy mind, redefine identity, redefine our identity. And the Urban Indian Heritage Society have a petition against the misclassification and the reclassification of indigenous population as something else. Colonialism seeks not only to occupy land, because they occupy this land as their own, when this land already belonged to a people that continue to live here, yes, that they tried to kill off, to create genocide, so that they don't make any claim. That's why we have Maroons. We have a Maroon population in various parts of the Caribbean. These people existed long before the Europeans came here, yes, and they remain here and they fought. Some of them fought the British and still have land that they own and control. I remember a whole society of their own. But colonialism seeks not only to they occupy land, occupy mind, redefine identity, control labor, extract resources, and impose foreign systems of knowledge, religion, governance, and economics upon colonized peoples. Fanon says colonization is a systematic and violent process of dehumanization. Yes, Hopton, go ahead.
Good evening, Prof. Good evening, class. I have always heard that the Maroons were runaway slaves,
Right.
but you seem to be redefining the class.
Not redefining, actually. No, it's not a redefinition. In 1655, when the British came to the Caribbean, and in Jamaica, sorry, there was a violent conflict between the Spanish and the British. The Spanish fled because they didn't properly man some of the Caribbean islands, including Jamaica, Trinidad, and so on. It wasn't properly manned. There was some local infighting because the church was against what they were doing to the people in the Caribbean, because the Spanish was here before the British. So in 1655, when they came, they saw the Spanish had Africans. Well, we call them Africans. We don't know if that's true, though. They were African people, black people, and indigenous population here. Many of the indigenous population, many of them fled. Sorry, they were released there because they apparently the Spanish left, okay, and left the people here, and they fled to the mountains, okay. So these people were already here, and many of them went to the mountains, and they knew the land very well. If they were new, then how would they know the land and how to navigate the land against the British? They knew the land so intricately that they were able to, for years, fight against the British and maintain their livelihood. They were never dominated because they knew the land too well. Britain and when the British came, they did not know the land very well. These people knew the land so well that they always avoided them. So yes, so it is. Yes, go ahead, Upton.
Okay. I'm because if you go to 1655, then you are still short of 1492, and I'm seeking an evidence that the Maroons would have existed before Columbus, who was the Spanish representative who claimed to have
But
discovered.
they weren't called Maroons. They weren't called Maroons. They were a people, indigenous people. The Spanish had a few African people, which I disagree that they were African people. I believe that they were indigenous people. They weren't called Maroons. They became known as the Maroon, okay, after 1655, which was when the British came. But when Columbus came, he saw a group of people here, and the people that he saw here were people that were indigenous people and people that were brown people and so on, and they worked together to develop the land. Some of them they enslaved them, and then once the British came, they released them, or some of them were allowed to live on the land anyways, and they went to the British came and saw these people here already. Some of them went to the mountains, or they were already occupying the land. Okay, and that is and when the urban Indian heritage people come next week, they will talk about the indigenous population, the kings and queens of the Caribbean, and so on and so forth. And as I said to you, what we know about these people, you can read Ivan Van Sertima, and I have the book here that you can refer to. We won't be able to delve into it. Research has been done by various people about the people that existed here, okay? I wrote an article, and there were several in the Jamaica Gleaners about 2 years ago, and several professors was engaged talking about the Maroon and the people that were here. So there is several evidence, and I'll send you the article later on, but we won't be able to get into that. But yes, okay, there is, and of course, you can't rely on European history. You can go to sociologists and anthropologists to look for that history, because as I said to you, colonization have its cultural erasure. Yes, you cannot rely on a certain history. to tell you that information, because in order for them to keep the land, they're not going to tell you that. They're not going to tell you that there were people here. They're not going to tell you that there were. They're going to tell you something else. It is their land, so that there can be no claims made against them for stealing this land. Yes, Kenyatta.
Sir, I'm just going back to the Maroon conversation, because from what I was taught, you had the Maroons were taken or enslaved and brought to Jamaica because the Maroon tribe are originally from Ghana, and they still do there's still that tribe in Ghana to this day, because I mean, I've heard persons talk about it, but that tribe still very much exists in Ghana. So what I was told was that they were enslaved and brought to Jamaica, and that there was also some of the British also would have, I believe, gone back to Ghana because they were having that whole thing with many of the Maroons. They were having challenges, so they wanted to find skill hunters and trackers. So they went back and brought back a particular group of skill hunters and so forth who knew the mountains to Jamaica to hunt, or to rather find the Maroons, other persons who were in the mountains, something along that line. So there is, I'm not entirely sure what's happening, because you're saying that they were there before, but other history teachings thought that they were brought there, as my
Yes, and I will actually, if you go through the syllabus, there is talk about maroonage in Jamaica. You can refer to the syllabus. There's also other books that I will share with you about maroonage in Jamaica. But just so you know, there's as it relates to the Maroons are descendants not only from enslaved Africans, but they're also they're enslaved Africans, but also descendants. They're descendants, but Maroons, as I said to you, are people who we were taught that were freed. They were freed after about just in the 1600s, when the British came and they went to live in the mountains. And but as I said to you, we're learning new things about the Maroon. The Maroons weren't necessarily there. The Spanish weren't actively engaged in bringing slaves to the Caribbean. It wasn't, the transatlantic didn't start until roughly in the 1600s. The transatlantic slave trade did not start until about the 1600s. When Columbus came to the Caribbean, he wasn't bringing slaves. Okay, he had a relationship with Africa. He learned, it is, when you read Ivan Van Sertima's book, They Came Before Columbus, it is clear that Europe and the Spanish was learning from the Africans. They were traversing the ports, learning about the West Indies and learning about the West Indies. So there was a cordial relationship between Spanish and Africa. Africa wasn't an underdeveloped group of continent. The people, they were civilized, they were sophisticated, but of course, history has been rewritten to tell us something else about Africa. I have a book here, They Came Before Columbus, by Ivan Van Sertima, and the ships that Portugal have were African-inspired ships. Okay. Very important to note. So when we think about history, we think that Africans were always oppressed people. Africans were fighters. Many of them went to China and were among the first samurais. Yes? Well, okay. Africans weren't monkeys and stupid and so on. Many of them traveled with Columbus and with the Spanish, helped them with navigation and inspired their navigational prowess. Fanon says colonization is a systematic and violent process of dehumanization. Now, when we
Sir,
talk about, yes,
but most of these persons that came to the Caribbean, sir, were from a royal lineage. So they weren't stupid.
they were not.
Many,
Okay, there were
many
people. The first class I did, we played C.L.R. James, who wrote the Black Jacobins. He said that these people, they quickly learned the technique of sugar plantation. They were they were civilized, they were sophisticated, they were intelligent people who knew how to read the Quran. Yes. So yes, okay, just so you know. Now, by the way, we don't have much time. Post-colonialism, also known as post-colonial theory, constitutes a critical academic examination of the enduring cultural, political, and economic legacies of colonialism and imperialism. It centers on the impacts of human domination and exploitation of colonized peoples and their lands. Emerging in the 1960s, scholars from formerly colonized nations pioneered the field, developing a critical theoretical framework to analyze the history, culture, literature, discourse influenced by European imperial. When we talk about post-colonialism, looked at the lingering effects, the enduring effects, cultural, political, and economic legacies of colonialism. How this control continued to affect the post-colonial subject today. How does colonialism continue today? That's post-colonialism studies that. That post-colonialism suggests that colonialism has not ended. It continues today in various forms. That's important to note. We don't have much time because we have to watch the film, which we're going to do in a second. What time is it? What time is it now, guys? Oh, we got to stop. Race is let me just finish the definition quickly. Race is what I want you guys to do is I have a timeline of the Caribbean. I really want us to go through that. That is on the JTS Moodle. Spend some time to review the timeline of the Caribbean. Make a note of something that you notice, okay? By the way, the definition of race is a social and political construct developed largely within European modernity to classify, to rank, to divide, and govern human beings based on a physical characteristics, particularly skin color. Race became a mechanism like roughly in the 1600s, in the late 15 to 1600s, just when they were about to start slavery. Just when because there was no idea, there was no idea of race. Race became a mechanism to justify slavery, colonialism, exclusion, domination, and the justification of inequality and exploitation. Okay? The next thing is when we talk about identity. Identity. This is hiding my the topic is identity, the question of who we are and who we ought to be. That is from Mirror Mirror, Rex Nettleford's book. Okay, the question of who we are and who we ought to be. The understanding, when we talk about identity, it is the understanding and the conception of oneself individually and collectively. When we talk about identity, identity is shaped by history, culture, language, spirituality, geography. Here we go. Memory. Memory is very important. Memory is very important because so you want to control someone. First of all, you strip them of any humanity and give them a false memory so that you have no memory of who you were. But identity is shaped by history, culture, language, spirituality, geography, memory. And talk about colonization helps it imposes on your identity through memory, gives you a false memory. It destroys any memory of, when we talk about the maroon, the idea of maroon and the idea of indigenous, as if Caribbean people don't have any connection to the indigenous population, the original people. All the indigenous people, the Arawakan people, they weren't all wiped out. Many of them were closely connected to who we are. Some of us are part of the indigenous population that lived in the Caribbean. But we have no memory. The only memory we have is the memory that has been imposed through education, facilitated by institutions that belong to the colonial masters today. Okay? So identity is shaped by history, culture, language, spirituality, geography, memory, class, race, gender, and political experience. And in the Caribbean context, identity is often contested and hybrid, shaped by colonialism, migration, resistance, African retention, globalization. Now, the question of who we are and what we are and ought to be is one of the enduring philosophical reflections associated with, of course, Rex Nettleford, who died in 2010, was a professor at University of the West Indies. His exploration of Caribbean identity, culture, and post-colonial consciousness. Hopeton, yes.
All right, Prof, as you talk about who we are and what goes together to put up our identity. My reason for asking the maroon question is that I can, as you were talking last week about doing family tree and tracing back where you are from.
Yeah.
My root is firmly maroon from
Wow.
both biological mother and father. And so
Where are you from? Which part of Jamaica you're from?
We would have originated from the St. Mary Maroons in Leinster, near Grandy Hole.
Okay. My grandmother is maroon.
There's a community up there, and
Yeah.
I can recall when I interacted with them at a young age, the kind of lifestyle that they had, so that my maternal grandmother and grandfather are from that community as Maroons, and
Yeah.
my father and my mother are from that community as Maroons as well. So that's why I'm interested in understanding whether or not there is more to the existence of the Maroon than the 1655 war between Spain and England, which seems to suggest the origination or the beginning of a group called Maroons, as the Spaniards released the slaves that they had who escaped to the mountains, and after time came back to give the English the hard time that they gave. But the history also indicates that you're looking at a structured group of people.
Yes.
Because when you talk about chief and their government and their ability to link across groups like Moko, linking with St. Mary, linking with the people, the Maroon people further up in Sligoville. When you look at that, you see something there that doesn't just suggest enslaved minds, but
Oh my God. Yes.
more order and capacity than you'd
Yes.
find. So I was really hoping that we could find a trace of history that would account for why you would have people like Nanny of the Maroons, Kojo, Taki, and these other, and why also you would find the government structure within the Maroon community that you see there.
Oh my God. You need to do a research on this as well. I mean, Hopeton, because they already, some of these, as I said to you, some of them are people that we call Maroons, were already part of the indigenous population that lived in the Caribbean that had communities or a structure, okay, in the Caribbean that shared with the Spanish when they came, lived with them, had life here with them, okay, and they had a communal relationship. In some places, we heard that the Spanish had, but it's the British that told us that the Spanish had enslaved them. Not necessarily so. I mean, in fact, when you read Ivan Van Septima, Columbus brought them to Portugal, shared them with the king. You know, they had Columbus had an appreciation for these people, okay, the indigenous people. And when the Spanish came, the British came, they fled. The Spanish fled, but the people were continued to live who were already living here, and we call them Maroons, but not necessarily so. And there were Africans here who were already here, but there was no transatlantic slave movement before the British came and started the slave trade and all of that. Okay, so we have to now think about that. And by the way, and you probably go to your family in Moko and so on and say, hey, trace their history. How far back their history go? Does it go beyond 1492? I'm quite sure it does. Okay, I'm quite sure, because I don't think their history is corrupted by by the European training that we have been received. Okay, because the fact that they have life, they have a system, they have a community. These people already had a system and a community. They weren't new people. If you know, when you start to study them, they could not have just been slaves who the Spanish freed, with such intricate system already in place. They are part of the indigenous population, and they kept their land, and nobody can go and take away the land from them, because it's their land from before Columbus. Yes. But anyway, so that's something. And when the Urban Indian Heritage Society come, they're going to share a little bit about that history too. But identity asks who we are. It asks about identity and historical reality. It demands that Caribbean people confront their African, but not just their African, their indigenous. You understand what I'm trying to say? Not just our African, but our indigenous, the brown part of us, Asian and European inheritances, honestly, rather than through colonial distortion. That's why some people practice certain practices. Okay, we talk about in some parts of the Caribbean, like Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, so on. Belize, Suriname, they still have that indigenous population that exists today, and that is why I deliberately put Suriname on there, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, so that you can understand that those people, there is an indigenous population there too, in addition to the African. Okay, but some countries, the British or the European was successful in reordering our memory, in destroying any connection that we have with our indigenous side. Next one is what we are. It examines the condition produced by history. Society shaped by plantation economies, dependency, creativity, hybridity, resilience, contradiction, and survival. And what we ought to be moves into ethics and future making. Rex Nettlefer believed Caribbean people must not remain trapped in colonial definitions of inferiority. Instead, we must consciously create ourselves through culture, education, political agency, and self-determination. And of course, this connects deeply with Rex Nettlefer wider argument in works such as Mirror Identity, Race and Protest in Jamaica and Caribbean Cultural Identity, where he argues that the Caribbean must see itself through its own eyes rather than through Europe's mirror. So when Hopton asked that question, of course, as I said to you, we have the history, and our education is set up to wipe any memory away, to change our memory and to create a false notion, and we can't make any claim against the land. It's their land. We were brought here. Not necessarily so. Okay? Of course, Rex Nettlesford's first book, Mirror Mirror, was written 70, and he argued, okay,
Professor,
yeah,
as you talk about Suriname in the connectivity of the black race, the Africans in the Caribbean,
yes.
is there anything also in Panama that we might interact with
Oh,
currently?
I should have included, oh my God. I should have included, but by the way, a lot of Jamaicans went to Panama in the
I
building canal. A lot of Jamaicans,
building the
yes.
canal, but also in the same way that Jamaicans were traveling between Jamaica and Haiti to assist with the Haitian Revolution. They were traveling to, I understand, traveling to Panama as well. And it might be Panama that they have established, that we have an established community
Yeah, we
that
know.
is
Yes,
still carries a lot of the old history and
yeah.
practices. I'm not sure. I'm querying.
No, no, that's true. And I should have actually included Panama because especially what's going on with the US saying that Panama was sold. They sold Panama, the Panama Canal. Panama Canal belonged to the Panamanians, okay? I don't even know what Donald Trump got this from. By the way, when we talk about the ethnic groups in Panama, of course, Panama, yeah, I mean, the Spanish invaded them, but they are a lot of mixed European and Amerindians, a lot of Amerindians, American Indians, okay, native Panamanians live there, and there was a lot of intermingling that takes place. But the local population, the Amerindians, they still existed in Panama, but they were largely peaceful people, and many of them intermingled there with the Spanish, with the Africans. So a lot of them are a lot of the Amerindians live in Panama up to this day, and they can trace their heritage as from way back before Columbus came to the Caribbean, okay, and before the Spanish came. Yes, a group of it. Yeah, so just so you know, and I should have actually included that. But the Panama Canal belonged to the Panamanians, but they weren't a people. They were, only the white man was. His attitude is conquest and control. He's competitive. The African, the indigenous population people of the Americas, they were more about sharing, inclusivity. They didn't build up walls or nation states, elaborate nation states, and steal your stuff and then build up wall to steal. That is a white man culture, to steal and then create laws to protect their ill-gotten gain. Okay? This idea of building up nations and then developing walls after you steal the people's land, and then create laws that protect against your theft, and then create a history and a system, and then outlaw critical thinking and critical thinking because they don't want us to think critically and to learn things about ourselves and our past and what they did to get where they are. Okay? But I probably should put Panama as one of the stuff that we should explore. But
Prof,
yeah.
you're not surprised. We're not surprised by the fact that they are aggressive takers and that they practice this. Their own history describe them as people who are marauding warmongers who, in amongst their own selves, fight for and take away from each other and
That is
secure
what
for themselves.
separates. And Edward Blyden, the African, the Afrocentrist, Edward Blyden, he actually differentiates between the African and the European. The African is inclusive and communal. The European is competitive. And so we talk about, well, today we talk about the competitive, developing our competitive nature and our competitive spirit. Maybe it's not within the Caribbean and based on our who we are as a people to become competitive, to be competitive. Yet at the same time, if we're not competitive, we will be dominated. So maybe we have to now revisit our history and so that in order to protect us from protect our position in the world and in life, maybe we have to now rethink some of our attitudes and develop a competitive nature. Okay, but that's interesting. By the way, in terms of, we're going to wrap up here in terms of this particular aspect and go straight to the movie right now. But the final point is dependency is a condition in which a nation, people, or economies rely heavily on external powers, institutions, or countries for survival, development, trade, capital, security, or legitimacy. Dependency often emerges from colonialism and it's maintained through neoliberal globalization, facilitated by structural adjustment, creating debt, unequal trade, foreign investment, aid, global capitalism. I won't get into that right now. Ramesh Ramsawan talked about structural adjustment. He defines it. Your textbook Neoliberalism defines structural adjustment and the processes of globalization. We'll talk about that later on if you need me to do that. But you can read Ramesh Ramsawan, The Challenge of Structural Adjustment in the Commonwealth, Caribbean, the preface and chapter 1. The book was published in 1992. My book, Neoliberalism, the preface, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 11. Okay, you can read that. That talks about the structural adjustment, the idea of structural adjustment, dismantling borders, dismantling barriers to trade, getting deregulation, tax reforms, deunionization, privatization. All those are part of the structural adjustment that facilitates globalization, but in a sense, which helps to create dependency. Dependency theory, to understand dependency theory, you have to understand Ramesh Ramsawan, who is from University of West Indies, and he talks about and there are several key points to understand this the idea of dependency. Dependency critiques traditional development models, emphasizing unequal power dynamics between the global south and the global north. The global north are post-industrial countries. The global south are formerly called third world or developing countries. The dependency theory talks about the reliance, the economic dynamic in the world where certain countries are heavily dependent on other countries, and that's a problem. But the problem for that is dependency happens when countries don't develop their capabilities. It is important for countries not to develop their capabilities. O'Neill.
Yes, sir. You asked us to remind you.
What time is it? Okay, we're gonna stop here.
It's an hour too.
Okay, we're gonna stop here now, and we're gonna watch as much as we can on this film. It's gonna be about an hour and 10 minutes. It talks about some of what we've been talking about, but it puts it in film form, and I would love we're gonna watch it together. Let me make sure I have it opened up for us. There we go.
Sir, I'm just looking at your what you call this again? Your accolades. I'm just looking at your accolades, sir. Is that what you have? 2 masters?
I have 3 masters, but yes.
3 masters. Oh.
Yes, I do.
Sir?
Yeah.
Question. I thought last week you said that you had rented the movie for 30 days and you would put it on mode where we could watch it on our own time. Was I correct?
No, I'm gonna watch. I want. All right. We're gonna watch the film Life and Debt. Okay. I want you to understand the idea of filmmaking. look at how she tells the story of globalization. Listen to what the people, to what is being said. Ask your question. Ask yourself: is it true? Does the film is the film is a documentary film? Documentary film is said to be revolutionary. Documentary film is revolutionary. It tells the truth about life and society. So, is it true what she's saying about globalization and about Jamaica and the Caribbean? This film is based on a book by Jamaica Kincaid called A Small Place about Antigua and how globalization have disproportionately affected Antigua and other parts of the Caribbean. This book is about Jamaica, but it's about the Caribbean and post-industrial countries and how they have suffered over the years from globalization. All right?